Good day, thank you for coming. My name is Oana Țoia, I'm the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania. I delivered this statement on behalf of 56 governments representing our European Union and NATO allies and partners, as well as partner nations from across the globe, joined here in solidarity, alongside my own government of Romania. On the night of 28th to 29th of May, a Russian drone carrying explosives entered the Romanian airspace in violation of international law. The drone, which was part of an overnight attack against Ukraine, crashed and exploded onto the roof of a residential apartment building in the city of Galați, Romania. For the first time, there have been injuries among Romanian citizens. 2 persons were injured and several residents required attention. The impact caused a fire and extensive damages, leading to the evacuation of the building. Airspace violations by Russian drones over Romania and other Central and Eastern European partners have occurred repeatedly since the outbreak of the Russian war in Ukraine and are a direct consequence of the escalation tactics pursued by Russia in its attacks against Ukraine. This most recent incident had a direct impact on the safety and security of innocent civilians in Romania. Such behavior is unacceptable under international law and must stop. We recall the Secretary General's recent remarks that the attacks against Ukraine generate serious and wide-ranging consequences that need to be addressed and need to be contained. Attacks against civilians calls for condemnation in the strongest terms, wherever they occur. We reiterate our support for a full, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire in the pursuit of a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine. In light of this violation of international law, Romania requested the convening of an urgent meeting of the Security Council, in accordance with Article 44 and 45 of the Charter, to address this grave matter. The meeting that will take place immediately will address the risks that further undermine peace and security in Europe. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for the support. We need the Security Council and we'll arrange questions afterwards. Thank you.
Go this way.
Yes, thank you for being here. I think it's important. All of them to see you speak. Kazu, thank you so for being with us last time. I always with you. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the representative of Latvia for her statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Madam President. And I thank the Colombian presidency for scheduling this emergency meeting on the first day of its presidency, and I wish you the best of luck for this month. I thank Director Goto for her informative briefing, and we also welcome Her Excellency, the Foreign Minister Suryo, to this meeting. Madam President, 4 days ago in this chamber, the Secretary General made a direct appeal for peace in Ukraine. He warned that the recent escalatory trajectory risks spiraling out of control. And yet, less than 4 hours later, a Russian drone packed with explosives crossed into Romania's airspace and hit a residential building in the city of Galați, enduring 2 civilians. Denmark condemns Russia's dangerous and reckless actions. We express our sympathy with injured and evacuated civilians. Denmark stands in full solidarity with Romania, our EU partner and NATO ally. Madam President, this drone excursion was another grave and irresponsible act by Russia as part of its illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. While it is the first time Russian drones have injured Romanian civilians, Russia had already violated Romanian airspace on numerous occasions in the past. In fact, with increasing frequency throughout its war against Ukraine, Russia's drones and fighter jets have repeatedly violated sovereign airspace in Europe. Russia has continued its barrage of widespread disinformation, and as we heard less than 2 weeks ago in this very chamber, it has even threatened a fellow council member. These acts stand in stark contrast to the widespread calls for peace by the wider UN membership. Russia started its illegal war against Ukraine with complete disregard for international law, believing that it can act with impunity in Ukraine and beyond. But Denmark and our allies would not be deterred. On the contrary, Russia's latest acts only serve to further strengthen our unwavering commitment to our collective security alongside allies, and to continue to provide comprehensive political, financial, economic, humanitarian, civilian, military, and diplomatic support to Ukraine and to its people. In closing, Madam President, Ukraine has been offering an immediate, unconditional, and comprehensive ceasefire for well over a year now. It is clear from the developments since then who wants peace and who is desperate to prolong this war at all costs. The only durable end to Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a lasting, just, and comprehensive peace in line with the UN Charter. The only path to this peace starts with a comprehensive ceasefire. Denmark reaffirms its commitment to the UN Charter and international law. Russia must end its senseless war and cease all hostilities. I thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the representative of Denmark, and I now give the floor to the representative of France. Thank you, Madam President, and congratulations and all of our support for your presidency of the Security Council this month, and we'd like to thank China for their presidency last month. Madam President, I'd like to thank Ms. Kayoko Goto, Director for Europe, Central Asia and the Americas, for her briefing, and I welcome the presence amongst us of Her Excellency Ms. Oana Silvia Toio, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania, and also the presence of colleagues from other delegations. During the night of 28th-29th May, as part of a new Russian attack in its war of aggression against Ukraine, a drone entered Romanian airspace and crashed into a building in the city of Galați, injuring several people. Romania's wish to convene this emergency meeting of the Council following this intolerable violation of its territorial integrity is legitimate, and it was the Council's duty to respond. France condemns this unacceptable incursion in the strongest possible terms. France wishes to express to Romania, its authorities and its people, its friendship and its full and unwavering solidarity. As a member of the European Union and NATO, Romania can count fully on our solidarity. The security of our allies is our priority and must be ensured. As the framework nation for the NATO multinational battalion deployed in Romania, France will continue to play its full role in strengthening the alliance's deterrence and defence posture on NATO's eastern flank. Madam President, this new violation of international law comes against the backdrop of Russia's continued irresponsible escalation in its merciless war of aggression against Ukraine, an escalation that has occupied this Council for several days. Russia has, in fact, claimed, and I quote, a policy of systematic offensive against the Ukrainian capital in yet another attempt to break the admirable resistance of the Ukrainian people and isolate them. It has instructed civilians, foreign diplomats and representatives of international organizations to leave the city, in blatant violation of the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations and International Humanitarian Law. Russia carried out massive strikes during the night of the 23rd and 24th of May against Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure, including through the third use of the Oreshnik ballistic missile, which is capable of carrying nuclear warheads. This has been referred to here. France recalls that Russia's statements do not in any way exempt it from its obligations under international law. France remains in Kyiv, standing alongside the Ukrainian people. The war of aggression launched by Russia in 2022 has also resulted in other forms of violations of international law. The Secretary-General's annual report on conflict-related sexual violence, published a few days ago, formally placed Russia on its blacklist because of sexual crimes committed by Russian armed and security forces in their war against Ukraine. This is the first time that a permanent member of this Council has appeared on this list of shame. Russia will be held accountable. Madam President, it is high time that Moscow put an end to an escalation that leads nowhere and to choose the path of serious dialogue, as it is invited by everyone to do. France calls on Russia to engage in peace negotiations in good faith. Supported by the vast majority of United Nations member states, the Secretary-General reiterated here on the 28th of May that the first step along this path must be an immediate, complete and unconditional ceasefire. France, together with its partners, is ready to be a part of this effort and remains committed to achieving a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. It will also always stand alongside Romania, its friend and ally. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias al representante francés.
Thank you very much, the representative of France. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
President, for convening this important emergency meeting, and I take this opportunity to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Security Council and wish you every success in your duties. You have our full support. On this occasion, I would like to express our appreciation to China for the presidency of the month of May. I would like also to thank Ms. Kayoko Goto, Director for Europe, Central Asia and the Americas, for her briefing, and I welcome the participation of Her Excellency Ms. Oana Choi, Foreign Minister of Romania. Madam President, in the last meeting of this Council on the repercussions of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, only last Thursday, we warned against the high risk of a vertical and horizontal geographical escalation following Russia's aggressive rhetoric, explicit or implicit threats against other countries of the region. We regret that this statement is even more relevant today after the incident of late last week in Romania. As we all know, during these last weeks, Russia has intensified its attacks in Ukraine, striking the capital and surrounding urban areas, has issued warnings and threats to the diplomatic community, has threatened Latvia and the Baltic countries, and has conducted common military exercises, including nuclear drills, with Belarus. All these incidents evidently cannot be viewed in a vacuum. Russia's violations against other European and NATO countries of the region is nothing new. We are reminded of the drone and Russian fighter jet incursions last year in Poland and Estonia, respectively, which were brought to the attention of this Council last September. Romania itself registered 47 different cases of drones or their debris falling into Romanian territory, with a similar instance of debris causing damages in Galați last month. Yet, this time Russia's reckless actions have caused human casualties, injuring Romanian civilians, one child among them. Greece unequivocally condemns this violation of Romania's airspace. We support and stand in full solidarity with Romania, an EU and NATO ally. We also express our deepest sympathies to the injured and all those affected and wish them a speedy recovery. Any violation of state borders, be it air, sea, or land, constitutes a clear and blatant breach of international law and the UN Charter, and is unacceptable. We demand that Russia ceases these unlawful acts immediately, respects its obligations under international law, and takes immediate steps to de-escalate the mounting tension in Ukraine. Madam President, we keep witnessing the destabilizing effects of this war and its implications for European and international security. The spillover effect of this violence risks spiraling out of control and needs to stop immediately. Therefore, I reiterate Greece's firm conviction that a full, immediate, and comprehensive ceasefire is needed now more than ever. This will allow for the resumption of dialogue and diplomacy. The overwhelming majority of the UN membership and of this Council has repeatedly requested it, and Ukraine itself has long agreed to. We call on Russia to now heed those calls. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you to Greece for your statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. Let me congratulate Colombia on assuming the presidency of the Council for the month of June. You have our full support. And I also thank China for their skillful stewardship of the Council through May. I also thank Director Gotto for today's briefing, and I welcome Foreign Minister Tsoyu to the Council for the meeting today. President, last Thursday, the Secretary-General warned this Council of the risks of Russia's illegal war against Ukraine. He warned of a war getting out of control, of miscalculation, and of escalation with unknown and unintended consequences. Then on Friday, a Russian drone hit a residential building in Galați, Romania, amid an overnight attack on Ukraine, injuring civilians. This incident demonstrates the growing impact of Russia's war against Ukraine beyond Ukraine's borders. Russia's actions represent a serious violation of NATO airspace. They were reckless and an unacceptable breach of Romania's sovereignty. The United Kingdom strongly condemns this further escalation that put lives at risk. Russia has once again demonstrated that it has no regard for civilian life, for international law, or for the sovereignty of its neighbours. And let us be clear about responsibility. This incident is a direct result of Russia's illegal, full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which has caused the deaths of over 15,000 civilians since February 2022. Russia bears full responsibility for this escalation and for the growing risks to regional and Euro-Atlantic security. Last week, the Secretary-General called for a full and unconditional ceasefire. Ukraine has repeatedly made clear its commitment to a just and lasting peace. We call on Russia to agree, without delay, to a full, immediate and unconditional ceasefire. President, NATO is a defensive alliance, but it is fully ready to defend its members. The United Kingdom is closely coordinating with Romania and NATO allies, including through our ongoing contribution to air policing with the Royal Air Force jets on NATO's eastern flank. NATO's combined strength is unparalleled, and its determination to defend peace and security in Europe is unshakable. We are united in our commitment to defend every inch of NATO territory. As my Prime Minister has said, we stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine with Romania, and with all our NATO allies. Our pressure on Russia to end its illegal war on Ukraine will not cease until a just and lasting peace has been secured. I thank you.
Le doy las gracias.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom, and I give the floor to the delegation of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to start by congratulating you on assuming the presidency of the Council for this month. And let me assure you that you will have my delegation's full support. And I also commend China for its skillful and successful stewardship of the Council last month. We welcome the participation of the distinguished Foreign Minister of Romania in this meeting. And I thank Director Goto for her remarks. And we endorse the Secretary General's call for restraint, an early end to this ongoing conflict, and for its peaceful settlement through dialogue. Madam President, we take note of Romania's request for this meeting and the reported violation of its airspace. At the very outset, let me reaffirm Pakistan's unequivocal support for the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of all states as enshrined in the UN Charter. These principles form the bedrock of interstate relations and must always be fully respected. In the context of today's meeting, I would like to make the following 3 points. First, my delegation, as well as many others in this chamber, have repeatedly forewarned about the potential negative consequences of a protracted conflict, including its expansion and spillover effects. Conflicts, especially those that remain active for longer durations, carry a greater risk of miscalculation and escalation. Regrettably, this is a pattern that we are witnessing in this particular situation. Second, the conflict in Ukraine has witnessed a precarious dimension to modern warfare, that is, the relentless use of armed drones. While on one hand it has affected battlefield dynamics, the evolving landscape of humanitarian challenges associated with these modern technologies remain a matter of concern and must be addressed within the rubric of IHL and its principles. Third, the reported incursion of armed drones into airspace of neighboring countries is alarming, and we deeply regret the reported civilian casualties and destruction of civilian infrastructure resulting from such incidents. Madam President, as we have said in the past, lasting peace in the region can only be achieved through a sustained and meaningful dialogue, and not by military means. In this context, we underscore the imperative of an immediate and complete cessation of hostilities and would urge all sides to recommit earnestly to the path of peace. Pakistan has and will continue to advocate for dialogue and diplomacy for peaceful settlement of this conflict. Further escalation only risks transforming this crisis into a larger confrontation with wider implications for regional and global peace and security. So bringing this conflict to an end would require commitment to the UN Charter's core tenets, a genuine accommodation of legitimate security interests of all sides, and conformity with existing multilateral instruments. We therefore see an early resumption of the US-facilitated dialogue process as the most credible path forward. This channel, if reinvigorated, can provide a mutually acceptable way out of this devastating conflict. In that spirit, Pakistan will continue to support all efforts aimed at achieving a comprehensive, durable, and peaceful resolution of this conflict. I thank you.
Thank you very much to the representative of Pakistan. I now give the floor to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Madam President, the Democratic Republic of the Congo wishes to congratulate you and your country, the sister Republic of Colombia, on the first day of your presidency. We wish you every success in guiding our work during the month of June, and we thank you for convening this emergency meeting devoted to the maintenance of peace and security in Ukraine. The Democratic Republic of the Congo would like to thank Director Goto for her information on the recent developments that led to the convening of this meeting. Madam President, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has taken note with concern of reports regarding the crash of drones in the municipality of Galați in the immediate vicinity of the Ukrainian border. Beyond considerations regarding the precise circumstances of this incident, these events once again illustrate the considerable risks that the continuation of hostilities pose to regional and international stability. While the Council has met on several occasions in recent weeks to examine developments of the situation in Ukraine, it must unfortunately be acknowledged that developments on the ground continue to confirm a troubling dynamic of escalation. The Democratic Republic of the Congo continually reaffirms that each new incident, each new strike and each new attack affecting inhabited areas demonstrates with particular clarity the extent to which this conflict continues to carry risks that now extend far beyond the immediate theatre of military operations. The human, political, security and economic consequences of this conflict are affecting territories and populations far removed from the immediate area of hostilities. This reality should encourage all parties to fully appreciate the consequences of a war whose impact continues to expand as the prospect of a political settlement grows more distant. Madam President, the DRC remains deeply concerned by the gradual expansion of the security footprint of this conflict, as well as by the progressive normalization of a wartime logic that appears to sustain a continuous cycle of military actions and reactions. Far from contributing to the possibility of lasting peace and relief for the populations trapped by this violence, this logic instead serves to increase human suffering, to further undermine regional security and multiply the risks of incidents that could lead to unpredictable consequences. Indeed, despite the growing sophistication of military means, civilian populations continue to bear the heaviest burden. This reveals a fundamental truth. Whatever its form or the technologies employed, war remains a source of human suffering, uncertainty, and risks whose consequences often exceed the goals pursued by the parties to the conflict. In light of this reality, the DRC recalls the need for all parties to fully respect their international obligations, particularly the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution in the conduct of hostilities. In this regard, the protection of civilian populations cannot be subject to any derogation. It remains a fundamental obligation under international humanitarian law. Madam President, the Democratic Republic of the Congo once again reaffirms that there can be no lasting military solution to this crisis. Successive developments on the ground confirm that military escalation produces neither lasting security nor a credible prospect of settlement. More troubling still, it sustains a dynamic whose effects now appear to extend well beyond the front lines, with consequences whose full scope no one can yet measure. This is why the DRC reiterates its call for an immediate ceasefire, concrete de-escalation measures, and a determined and unequivocal return to the diplomatic path. We urge all parties, without exception, to prioritize dialogue, exercise restraint, and engage in good faith in initiatives aimed at creating the conditions for a peaceful settlement of the conflict. My delegation remains convinced that only a negotiated political solution, founded on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, as well as on respect for international law, will make it possible to pave the way for a just, lasting and credible peace. Madam President, in conclusion, Recent events should be seen as a further reminder of the human, security and political cost of continuing hostilities. The longer the war continues, the more risks accumulate, the more suffering intensifies, and the more the prospects for a negotiated settlement recede. Only through de-escalation, diplomacy and political will can the path toward a lasting peace be opened for the benefit of civilian populations and international stability. I thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and I now give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Madam President, we congratulate Colombia on its presidency of the Council this month. We wish you every success, and we thank the People's Republic of China for their impeccable presidency. Madam President, we note that Romania has hastily convened this meeting and immediately put forward unfounded and biased accusations against Russia. We believe that the main purpose of today's meeting is to satisfy demand by Western countries to generate yet another wave of anti-Russian media hype at any cost. In that regard, we would like to present an objective version of the events, since the details provided by the Romanian side regarding the crash of the UAV in the city of Galați raise questions from both a technical as well as from a factual perspective. The Russian armed forces did conduct operations targeting the military infrastructure of the Kiev regime on the night of May 29th. These actions are being carried out in response to the terrorist attacks carried out by the Kiev regime against Russian civilian infrastructure facilities, which are systematic and consistent in nature. As part of those operations, strikes targeted facilities in the port of Reni in the Odessa region, through which our former Western partners supply military goods for the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces. There, those shipments are unloaded, warehoused, and then distribute further across Ukraine to be used in attacks against our civilian population. Of course, we will be destroying such shipments as early and as remotely as possible. According to official Romanian data, there was an impact in the city of Galați allegedly involving a Russian Grand 2 UAV that struck the roof of an apartment building. The payload of such a UAV carries approximately 50 kilograms of explosives. If such a drone had, as claimed, indeed hit the roof of a building, the consequences would not have been limited to the fire that was shown by Romanian media. The roof would have been destroyed completely. The distance from the port of Reni to this building in Galați is 19.5 kilometers. If Ukrainian armed forces had been capable of engaging the Russian drone near Reni, it would have fallen there and certainly would not have flown such a distance without detonating in midair. The full circumstances of what happened must be established through a thorough, objective, and depoliticized investigation with the involvement of the Russian side first and foremost. We are ready to participate in such an investigation, but of course only if objective data and debris of the drone are shared with us for our analysis. Only then will we be able to provide an assessment of what actually happened. This is exactly how we acted in our contacts with U.S. representatives in December 2025 when we handed over the flight mission controller and other components of Ukrainian UAVs that attempted to attract the residence of the president of Russia in Valdai. Any assessment of such incidents must be based on verified facts and not political slogans. We draw your attention to the inconsistencies in statements by Romanian officials. Initially, they spoke of an allegedly deliberate Russian strike on a civilian object. Then, just hours later, the president of Romania, Nicu Șordan, revised that position, stating that a result of Ukrainian air defense activity, a Russian drone had changed course and entered Romanian airspace. At the same time, the possibility of a provocation by Kiev aimed at testing NATO member states' reaction once again and accelerating their direct involvement in the crisis was not even considered. We also believe it is no coincidence that this drone incident occurred the day after President Zelensky appealed to U.S. President Donald Trump for missiles for American Patriot air defense systems. Zelensky also publicly lamented that Washington was ignoring his requests. It is regrettable that Romania failed to provide any objective data to the Russian side and immediately began implementing the political agenda of its senior partners. The same applies to statements by NATO's Allied Command in Europe, which rushed to assign blame. Instead of professional cooperation, pre-prepared retaliatory measures were taken, such as the closure of the Russian Consulate General in Constanța and the demand that the Consul General leave the country within 72 hours. Once again, rather than seeking the truth, the focus shifted to using an isolated incident to fuel anti-Russian hysteria. Western Russophobes are essentially creating new pretexts to close their ranks in opposition against Russia and to maintain bloc discipline, including encouraging continued military support for the Zelensky regime. This incident also helps Europe shield Ukraine and provides some kind of justification for their bellicose rhetoric towards Russia. This is especially important in the context of recent tragic events in the Luhansk People's Republic, which needed to be urgently downplayed by interrupting the news agenda of the day. Madam President, just over a week ago, on May 22nd, the Kyiv regime carried out a horrific terrorist attack in Starobelsk. As a result of strikes on the dormitory of a teacher's college, 21 people were killed, mostly young women, and over 40 students were injured. The entire world learned of this latest atrocity carried out by the Kyiv regime, but the Western political establishment, including our colleagues in the Security Council, chose to ignore this act of terrorism. Not a word of condolences, only accusations of fake news and lack of information. You all attended these meetings, and you must remember this well. After all, victims in regions whose populations are not regarded as worthy by Kyiv and its Western sponsors deserve no reaction from the West. They are, from the very beginning, treated as fake and non-existent victims. Whether there were 50 of them burned alive by Ukrainian Nazis in the trade union house in Odessa in 2014 or 21 in Starobelsk, they simply do not exist. We promised at the last meeting that we would disseminate materials regarding these allegedly non-existent victims, and we will do so. However, as soon as an incident occurs that can be framed within an anti-Russian narrative, the Western propaganda machine is launched immediately. This well-established pattern has long become a hallmark of European countries' approach to Ukraine. Each new incident involving the fall of a missile, a drone, or their fragments on EU territory is treated as a convenient news coverage opportunity. First come the accusations against Russia, to which political conclusions are tailored, and only later, if at all necessary, is there any discussion of the facts. In this regard, it is important to recall the incident in Przewodo, Poland in November 2022. At that time, after a missile fell and killed 2 people, the Kyiv regime and its Western sponsors hastily presented it as a Russian strike on a NATO member state's territory. There were immediately statements regarding a Russian attack on the news, the need for a firm attack, and even the possibility of activating certain mechanisms of the alliance. In other words, the Ukrainian authorities were essentially attempting to use people's deaths, to provoke a direct clash between Russia and NATO. It later emerged that the missile in question was, in fact, a Ukrainian S-300 system, and this sharply changed the tone of Western statements. Certainty vanished immediately, and loud accusations gave way to very cautious statements. But the most important thing never happened. We never heard either condemnation of the Kyiv regime's actions, nor any acknowledgement that its irresponsible actions could have brought Europe to the brink of a far more dangerous scenario. None of those who automatically blamed Russia for everything faced any political accountability for their hasty and unfounded accusations, and no one ever demanded an explanation from Kyiv. The incident in Galați is far from an isolated case. The geographic spread of Ukrainian rockets and UAVs across Europe continues to expand, affecting Poland, Romania, Latvia, Lithuania, and Finland. Ukrainian drones falling in these countries, because of which some governments were even forced to resign, is something that remains in the periphery of the Security Council's attention. Blame is routinely placed on Russia, but European leaders fail to recognize that this is a natural consequence of their own policies. Each such new case is a direct result of their destructive course of arming the Kiev regime and encouraging further escalation. And then, after some time has passed, it turns out that yet another Russian trace turned out to be a Ukrainian one, in fact, but Western governments prefer to keep this silent and avoid convening Security Council meetings because condemning Kiev for them would mean acknowledging their own responsibility. Madam President, given the Security Council's busy agenda, we believe it is important to use this meeting to draw attention to a truly important issue related to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Just 2 days ago, Kiev regime fighters used fiber optic guided drones to strike the turbine hall building of the plant's sixth power unit. They pierced the metal section of the facade of the machine room, and it was only by sheer luck that the reactor compartment, which was located 10 meters away from the explosion, was left undamaged. IA inspectors who arrived on the scene confirmed that there was a strike against the plant. We call on Security Council members to issue a principled and objective assessment of the reckless actions of the Kiev regime, which creates the threat of a catastrophic radioactive contamination, potentially not only for Russia and Ukraine, but a number of European states. And this is not the first time that the nuclear power plant has come under fire from the Ukrainian armed forces. Attacks have been going on for a long time, both against the plant itself and the city of Enerhodar. One would think that this is precisely where European states would be most concerned, yet we see neither emergency statements from Brussels nor urgent meetings of European leaders, nor demands that Kiev cease its actions. This is yet another indicator that EU countries are deliberately and purely for political reasons turning a blind eye to the crimes of the Zelensky regime. However, if a catastrophe were to occur, no one will be able to sit it out safely. Radioactive contamination knows no state borders. Its consequences will affect the entire European continent. The reaction of the UN Secretariat and the IAEA to this is particularly bewildering. They're trying to have it both ways, expressing concern and speaking of the need to exercise restraint and avoid escalation. These vague statements and unsubstantiated calls for peace are incapable of dampening the current level of escalation. Unfortunately, they not only create an atmosphere of impunity and permissiveness, they push the Kiev regime towards new crimes as well. Thank you.
Muchas gracias por la declaración.
Thank you very much to the representative of the Russian Federation for that statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Colombia on its presidency of the Council this month. We wish you every success. I also thank the People's Republic of China for their valuable efforts during their presidency of the Council last month. I would also like to thank Ms. Kayako Goto, Director of the Europe and Central Asia Division in the Department of Political and Peace-Building Affairs, for her enriching briefing. We also welcome the participation of Her Excellency Oana Tui, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania, as well as the other participants in this meeting. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain has followed the reports regarding the repercussions of the Russia-Ukraine war in neighboring countries, particularly in Romania, with deep concern. We are particularly concerned by civilian victims. This recent escalation is only the latest phase in a war that has lasted now for 5 years. The Kingdom of Bahrain stresses the imperative of abstaining from attacks on civilian objects and critical infrastructure, there is a need to exercise wisdom and restraint while respecting the rules of international humanitarian law and ensuring the protection of civilian populations under all circumstances. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain warns of the dangers posed by the use of drones in armed conflicts, particularly given the increasing escalation and damage that they cause, particularly when their effects extend beyond the parties to the conflict and affect other countries. This is something that could undermine peace and stability and security on the European continent. In this regard, the Kingdom of Bahrain reaffirms the absolute need to abide by international law, including international humanitarian law, and to take all the necessary measures to protect civilians and civilian objects. The continuation of the current approach would only further complicate existing crises and undermine international efforts aimed at achieving de-escalation and finding peaceful solutions to conflicts. President, we reiterated what was stated by the Secretary General of the United Nations during the Council's meeting last week, when he said that the trajectory of the war towards further escalation threatens to spin out of control. Such escalations undermine all diplomatic efforts aimed at reducing tensions and bringing the war to an end. They may also prolong a conflict whose cost is borne primarily by civilians. That is why the Kingdom of Bahrain emphasizes the need to intensify diplomatic efforts to put an end to this war in Ukraine in a manner that supports peace initiatives and reinforces security and stability in Europe, while taking into account the security concerns of all parties, as well as neighboring states. And this to achieve a sustainable solution that restores peace and security in Europe. To conclude, President, the Kingdom of Bahrain reaffirms its unwavering position in support of the peaceful settlement of disputes. We support regional and international efforts aimed at finding a political, comprehensive, and lasting solution to put an end to the Russian-Ukraine war through dialogue and negotiations in line with the principles of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias al
Thank you very much to the representative of Bahrain. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama. Thank you very much, Madam President. Firstly, allow me to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Council for June, and also congratulate China for their work during the month of May. We'd like to thank Ms. Goto, Director for Europe, Central Asia and the Americas in the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, for her briefing on the events that occurred in Romania on the night of the 28th to the 29th of May, which we strongly condemn. We acknowledge the participation of the distinguished delegations joining us in the chamber, and we cordially would like to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Iona Silvia Toiu, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Romania. Well, we're meeting once again in response to an incident that heightens the alarm and concern of the majority of Security Council members regarding the conflict in Ukraine. The prolongation and intensification of this war not only worsens the situation in the territory directly affected, but also extends its destabilizing consequences to the region as a whole, creating a growing risk to international security. What occurred in Romania is not an isolated incident. The Security Council has previously addressed the incursion of drones into neighboring states in the context of the conflict in Ukraine. This is a trend that is becoming increasingly concerning because of its recurrence and because of its scope. The limited control and precision capabilities of unmanned systems significantly increase the risks associated with their use in armed conflict situations. In this regard, states that deploy such systems must assume enhanced responsibility in accordance with international humanitarian law and must be held accountable for any damage resulting from their use, particularly when civilians are affected. Madam President, the war in Ukraine cannot continue along this spiral of consequences for the civilian population, both within and beyond its borders. The parties must urgently halt the cycle of violence and move toward an immediate and unconditional ceasefire that would significantly de-escalate this conflict. We call upon those who maintain influence and the confidence of the parties to continue their mediation efforts and strengthen channels of dialogue at the highest level. It is essential to consolidate diplomatic and political efforts, leading to a solution that is consistent with international law and the Charter of the United Nations, so that, finally, after 4 years, peace may be restored between the parties. Thank you.
Gracias.
I thank the representative of Panama, and I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, my delegation congratulates you on the assumption of the presidency for the month of June. We also commend the exemplary leadership of the Chinese presidents in the able manner in which they have guided the Council's work last month. We thank Ms. Goto for her comprehensive update on the deeply concerning development unfolding in Eastern European region. We also welcome the presence of Her Excellency Ms. Toiu, Foreign Minister of Romania, in today's meeting. Madam President, the reported situation continues to be a great concern and carries serious implications for regional stability and international norms, underscoring the fragility and volatility of the current security environment. Furthermore, divergent narratives underscore the urgency of the situation and the critical need for diplomacy and dialogue. The protection of civilian and critical infrastructure is a fundamental obligation enshrined under international humanitarian law. Continued escalation only serves to heighten tensions and undermine peace, stability in the region. In this regard, we call upon all parties to exercise maximum restraint to prevent further miscalculations. A durable resolution will require a genuine commitment to de-escalation and renewed focus on diplomatic efforts. Madam President, to conclude, my delegation reaffirms its unwavering support for all efforts to uphold the principles of international law and to achieve just and lasting solutions consistent with the United Nations Charter. I thank you.
Thank you very much to the representative of Somalia. And I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Director Goto, for your briefing today. We welcome in the Council Romania's Foreign Minister, Ms. Oana Silvia Țoiu. Colleagues, we condemn the reckless incursion of a Russian military drone which crossed into Romanian airspace and struck a Romanian apartment building, injuring multiple people. The United States stands with its NATO ally Romania. Our thoughts are with the injured and all affected in Galați. As we have said before, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. The incident further underscores why the Russia-Ukraine war must immediately end. The United States reiterates its call for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire as a step towards a durable, negotiated end to the war. The war must stop. The United States remains ready to do whatever possible to immediately end the Russia-Ukraine war for good. Thank you.
I would like to thank the representative of the United States for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. And taking the floor for the first time under your presidential gavel, Liberia congratulates the Colombian delegation, pledges its support for your success, and thanks the Chinese delegation for their excellent stewardship of the Council last month. We thank the briefer and welcome Her Excellency, the distinguished Minister for Foreign Affairs of Romania, as well as all other distinguished permanent representatives participating in this meeting. Madam President, Liberia learned about cross-border weapons spilled over from the silence of affected villages that no longer had people in them. Decades ago, our own borders, like many across conflicted regions in Africa, were routinely dissolved by shifting armed factions. In today's new form of warfare, characterized by drones technology, we continue to see, without excusing it, that the worst cross-border spillovers may not be deliberate. However, they are the foreseeable systemic consequence of deploying automated weapons at the margins of frontiers. It is with this lens that we examine this regretted incident in Romania, in which a mother and her child are said to have been injured. Madam President, the absence of hostile intent has never equaled the absence of consequence. When highly automated weapons-grade systems are operated in dense electronic warfare environment immediately adjacent to neutral territory, any resulting accident risk being compounded and escalated. Excellencies, the technical margins of modern conflicts are too narrow to guarantee the safety of neutral states. The only durable antidote to cross-border spillover, therefore, is not more sophisticated correction algorithms. It is the cessation of the hostilities that are driving the conflict. This war must stop. While diplomatic pathways to peace are being forged, civilians in conflict-adjacent states must not be left unprotected. We call on all members of this world bodies, without exception, to return to the full adherence of the UN Charter, the promise to which we all sign onto, and the supremacy of diplomacy toward the peaceful resolution of conflicts. In conclusion, Madam President, let us act to ensure this does not happen again in Romania or anywhere else, demanding restraints on all sides and immediate de-escalation toward an end to the war, with respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all nations, including Romania. Liberia is ready to act. We call on this council to similarly be ready, and I thank you.
Gracias.
I thank the representative of Liberia, and I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me begin by congratulating Colombia on assuming the presidency of the Council for this month. I'm confident that under your stewardship, Madam President, the Council will deliver its mandate effectively. You can count on the full support of the Chinese delegation. I thank Director Goto for her briefing. China has taken note of the reports about a drone entering the Romanian airspace and resulting in injuries, as well as the statements and reactions from Romania, Russia, and other relevant sides. China consistently advocates for observing the purposes and principles of the UN Charter by all states in international relations and hopes that the parties concerned will keep calm, exercise restraint, and engage in dialogue and communication to establish facts, address questions raised, and resolve disputes with a view to avoiding misconceptions, misperceptions, and miscalculations and preventing the incident from expanding and escalating. This incident is a result of the Ukraine crisis spilling over across borders. Recently, the Ukraine war has been on a spiral of escalation, not only taking an immense toll on the two parties concerned, but also implicating the security of neighboring states, further eroding the trust among countries in the region. If allowed to continue down this path of deterioration and escalation, or worse still, to spiral out of control, the situation is bound to result in irrevocable consequences. Ever since the crisis broke out, China has been consistently calling for no expansion of the battlefield, no escalation of fighting, and no provocation by any side. In light of the current circumstances, these three principles have now become particularly relevant. Countries in the region and the international community at large need to work together to facilitate de-escalation and call for more level-headed and good-faith dialogue and engagement and less confrontational rhetoric that inflames the situation. Madam President, to prevent similar incidents from happening again, the only way out lies in politically settling the Ukraine crisis at an early date. Guided always by the 4 points about what must be done put forward by President Xi Jinping, China has all along been calling for a ceasefire and cessation of hostilities, promoting talks for peace and facilitating a political settlement. It is our hope that the parties concerned will resume talks at the soonest, take seriously and address properly the reasonable security concerns of one another, and strive for early conclusion of a peace agreement. China stands ready to work with the international community to continue playing a constructive role in seeking a political settlement of the crisis. I thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much to the representative of China. And I will now make a statement in my quality as representative of Colombia. I'd like to thank Ms. Kayuko Goto, officer in charge of the Europe, Central Asia and the Americas Division of the Department of Political and Peace-Building Affairs and the Department of Peace Operations. I thank her for her briefing. And I welcome and greet Her Excellency Oana Tsoiu, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania. And I also extend my greetings to the delegations joining us at today's meeting. We have received with great concern the report of the incident that occurred on the 29th of May in Galați, Romania, according to which a drone struck a residential building, causing property damage and injuring 2 civilians. We express our solidarity with the individuals affected and with their families, and we wish them a speedy recovery to those that were injured. And we also express our solidarity with Romania in light of the consequences of this incident that occurred on its territory. Colombia has taken careful note of the information presented and underscores the importance of ensuring that the circumstances surrounding what occurred are clarified independently, objectively, in a transparent manner and quickly. Beyond the specific circumstances of the case and the corresponding investigations, this incident highlights the risks that armed conflicts may pose to regional security and stability. It serves as a reminder that the effects of hostilities often extend beyond the immediate areas of combat, affecting civilian populations and the infrastructure of third states, with potential consequences for regional peace and security. As this Council has emphasized on numerous occasions, the protection of civilians and the prevention of further escalation must remain at the heart of our efforts. The events that have prompted this meeting and the danger that they may be repeated reinforce the need to act with prudence, responsibility, and the utmost restraint. Respect for the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, including respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, as well as adherence to international law, remain fundamental elements for preserving international peace and security, and are not rendered inapplicable under any circumstances. This includes due consideration and protection for non-belligerent states, whose territories and populations must be respected at all times, without exception. Equally important is ensuring compliance with the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution under international humanitarian law, which are not merely secondary considerations. Much rather, they constitute essential obligations whose observance helps limit human suffering and reduces the risk of further escalation. In this context, we make a broad call to prioritize and make use of diplomatic channels in order to avoid actions that could in any way worsen existing tensions and redouble efforts aimed at reducing risks to the civilian population and preserving regional stability. Thank you.
Vuelvo a asumir las funciones.
I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Oana Silvia Soiu, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Romania.
Madam President, thank you for convening the United Nations Security Council. Thank you as well to the presidency, the Chinese presidency, for the support in preparing for this meeting, and to partners that have supported Romania's request. The seriousness of this current moment cannot be overstated. It is for the first time in the 70 years history of our UN membership that Romania requests an urgent meeting of the Security Council on a matter that involves us directly. Now, our history was not without challenges, especially as I have heard here in the room mentions of who understands the Russian Federation. I would say that the eastern part of Europe, we do have our share of understanding it. And although our history has not been without challenges, we have not called on the UN Security Council until today. But we do so today because what we have achieved in the many years that have passed is to build a safe country, to build a growing economy. We have increased in the 3 decades that have passed 10 times our economy. We have managed to also be a security partner for the region. And we want to see this into the future. But we do understand now more than we have done before that in order for this to happen, in order for this to be without risk, we do need to do everything that is within our responsibility, individually and collectively, to help stop the war at our border and to find a diplomatic pathway in that direction. We have a joint responsibility not just to draw a line, but to make sure we do not move that line. as people would want sometime. It is imperative for the Council to address such unnecessary escalation by the Russian Federation in its war of aggression against Ukraine. The Security Council is the most powerful tool of the international community, a common tool that we have to prevent the perception of a normalization of the abuse. We can and should not move the line we have drawn. We should not consider these current escalations as the new normal. On the night of 28 to 29th of May, a Russian drone carrying explosives violated the Romanian airspace at 2 a.m. Our military analysis shows that this drone was initially part of a swarm of drones used in an overnight attack against Ukrainian civilian infrastructure on the Danube, and traveled for 4 minutes within our territory and eventually crashed on the 10th floor of a residential apartment building in the city of Galați, Romania. The area where it crashed is close to the border area between Romania, Republic of Moldova, and Ukraine. Since the beginning of the war of aggression against Ukraine, Russian drones entered numerous times the Romanian airspace, as well as the airspace of other partners in Central and Eastern Europe, in breach of international law and the UN Charter. And at this Council, those examples have been addressed from Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia. Since the start of the invasion, they were brought to the attention of this Council, and we have talked at length about them and expressed our solidarity to each other. In Romania's case, just this year, we have seen more than 30 such incursions, and we have seen a growing frequency. What makes it different this time, though, is that it is the first time since the start of the war of aggression against Ukraine that Romanian citizens also require medical care and that Romanian property has been significantly damaged. A mother and child were injured and required medical care, but now are out of risk. The impact caused the fire and extensive damages to the building. The building itself was temporarily evacuated. I want to provide context. The drone crashed in a highly densely populated residential area where children, women, and men live safely with their families. The effects could have been more astounding. Romania firmly condemns this reckless behavior and repeated illegal intrusion by Russian vehicles into our sovereign territory. Irrespective of what was their initial destination, the gravity of the action and the responsibility of the perpetrator are clear. The risk further undermines peace and security in Europe and, through its wider implications, represents a concern for the entire UN membership. Madam President, our military analysis shows without a doubt that the drone that crashed on Thursday night in Galați is a Geran 2 of Russian origin. This undeniable conclusion is backed by clear findings of a technical report issued by our special investigators and presented to the public by our President, on the basis of a consistent set of technical evidence. Apart from an inscription in Cyrillic characters of the name Geran 2 from the recovered fragments, the report conclusively established that the electronic components, navigation systems, control modules, engine, construction elements show similarities to those of other Geran 2 drones previously recovered in Romania and identified as being manufactured in the Russian Federation. The report also shows manufacturing markings, technical inscriptions, construction features and materials used follow the same technological process. The chemical analysis points to the same origin. Madam President, reckless violation by Russian drones of the airspace of Romania and of other Central and European partners have occurred repeatedly since the outbreak of the war against Ukraine. This Council also met after such incidents. This most recent incident is an extremely unsettling reality, as it shows an increasing pattern of indiscriminate drone strikes injuring civilians across the border, and such behavior is unacceptable under the UN Charter and international law. This modern warfare with autonomous vehicles does not create a distance from responsibility. We recall the Secretary General's recent warnings in this Council a day before the incident, that the rate of escalation we are witnessing in attacks against Ukraine generates serious and wide-ranging consequences. These need to be addressed and contained, not only because of their extremely serious impact on the ground and in and of themselves a great cause for concern and condemnation, but also because they erode the basic premises for diplomacy, peace and security. Anytime, anywhere, in any situation, attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure call for condemnation in the strongest terms. Romania reiterates our solidarity with our neighbor Ukraine and its people in their legitimate self-defense against the aggressor and in the exercise of their sovereign right to freely choose their future. Since the start of the aggression, we have been witnessing harrowing accounts of the immense toll of the war on civilians in Ukraine. The courage of Ukrainians, their sacrifice, their power of innovation and resilience should be respected and supported. But because they do have an increased power to defend themselves, we should not consider this the new normal. We should continue to increase diplomatic pressure on the aggressor to stop. For a long time, Romania is a reliable country and a security provider in its region and beyond. Our efforts benefited our partners around the world, be it the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which facilitated access of Ukrainian grains to consumers around the world, the EU Solidarity Lanes, our contribution to demining in the Black Sea alongside our partners, are just a few areas where we do hope we have contributed significantly and will continue to do so. We have the longest border with the war, and we do have the responsibility to protect it, of course, for our citizens, but also because it is the border of the European Union to the war, it is the border of the Allied and NATO members, and as well, it is not just a shared responsibility, but of course, something that exposes Romania to the consequences of the war. And that makes us even more resilient in continuing the effort towards the path for peace. Since the outbreak of the war in 2022, these consequences have been felt in the broader region of the Black Sea, including the neighbor Republic of Moldova. Of course, we are not parties of the war, and we have been clear about this since day one. But we want to be part of the effort to stop the war and have a settled peace. We do need to search for that path together. We reiterate our support for a full, immediate and unconditional ceasefire and the pursuit of a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine, in line with the UN Charter and international law, and in full observance of the principles of sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity within internationally recognized borders. We have said it before in this Council, and we will repeat it once again today. Robust and workable security guarantees for Ukraine are essential for a credible peace in face of an aggressor with a historical record of relapsing into breaches of international law. This reckless behavior and blatant disregard of human suffering not only goes against the UN Charter and international law, including international humanitarian law, but it also intentionally disregards the diplomatic effort led by those that wanted to bring us closer to peace. We are time and again confronted with a staggering paradox. We seek accountability in this Council, where the Russian Federation, a permanent member who should ensure the full respect of the UN Charter and international law, is also the aggressor. Such impunity in a blatant deviation of the fundamental principles and purposes of the UN Charter goes against the core mission of this organization, maintaining international peace and security through good faith cooperation among member states. As several members in this Council have emphasized before us, this type of escalatory behavior represents a concrete challenge to international peace and security and should be condemned as such. Romania's request for this meeting and my presence here in this chamber is an act of responsibility on our behalf and the genuine commitment to the principles that underpin multilateralism and the authority of the Council. Allow me to appreciate the expression of support and solidarity conveyed by the international community in the aftermath of the incident in Galați, including around this table, and during the media stakeout prior to this, where we've delivered a statement on behalf of 56 countries, and we're grateful for that. This reconfirms the crucial role of the Security Council and the United Nations as a whole in ensuring that breaches of the UN Charter and international law do not remain unaddressed and unaccounted for. My citizens back home are asking if words are enough for the situation we're in. But we are committed to the diplomatic pathway ahead, and especially in this room, especially in the Security Council, words hold a strong power. It is the widest legitimacy of an institution to host such needed dialogues, as uncomfortable as they might be. The needed dialogues to support peace. And for that, we do need the common response, as we have seen throughout these days, to these blatant violations of international law. And we do need to collectively support the path toward peace at our border. It is also another reason why we speak here today, and we are grateful for your interventions as well. Truth is not always self-evident. Truth itself also needs to be protected as we protect our land, our waters, our air. We do need to protect facts because they are misinterpreted, and sometimes for those that have no arguments to be able to explain their behavior, they try to run away from responsibility by trying to change the truth with their narratives. So our presence here today, our intervention here today, is also in protection of the truth and in making sure that those that are victims of the aggression are not painted as the aggressors. Romania will continue to be a reliable partner, and we're grateful for the international support we see in this community. Thank you.
Doy la gracia a la excelente.
I would like to thank Her Excellency Ms. Soyu for her statement. I wish to remind all speakers to limit their statements to no more than 3 minutes in order to enable the Council to carry out its work expeditiously. The flashing light on the microphone will prompt speakers to bring their remarks to a close after 3 minutes. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations.
Madam President, I have the honour of delivering this statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The candidate countries North Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, Ukraine, Republic of Moldova, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Georgia, as well as Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, Andorra and Monaco align themselves with this statement. Thank you to Colombia and to you, Madam Ambassador, for scheduling this meeting, and congratulate you on the first day of assuming the presidency, and warm congratulations as well to China and its ambassador for their UNSC stewardship in the month of May. Colleagues, the European Union strongly condemns the grave incident of the 29th of May in which a Russian drone carrying explosives that was part of one more overnight attack against Ukraine crashed into a residential building in Galați, Romania. You heard from the Minister, and welcome to this chamber as well, the details. On behalf of the EU and all its member states, I express my full solidarity with Romania, its citizens, and those affected by this incident. Colleagues, this reckless act was not a fluke. It is a direct result of Russia's continuing war of aggression against Ukraine. Russia bears full responsibility for the consequences of its escalatory behavior and its continued military actions, which once again threaten the security of EU citizens, regional stability, and international peace. The European Union reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the security of Romania and all its member states, and stands ready to accelerate efforts to strengthen protection against such threats, including through Eastern Flank Watch and other initiatives to consolidate European defence readiness. The EU will continue to advance its initiatives aimed at strengthening defence of all EU land, air and maritime border capabilities, including on the Eastern Flank, reinforcing defence readiness and consolidating resilience. We will continue to ensure that the EU is better equipped to act and deal in a coordinated way with a 360 approach. Colleagues, Russia's continuing serious violations of European airspace only reinforce our resolve to support Ukraine and its people in their defense against Russia's war of aggression and their pursuit of a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in accordance with international law, including the Charter of the United Nations. In this regard, we must all further raise the cost for Moscow to end this war. President, let us not forget that Friday's incident happened on the back of several meetings of this Security Council, where the large majority of members spoke out clearly in favor of a full, unconditional and immediate ceasefire. So did Ukraine. The EU actively supports all diplomatic efforts to this end, and we once again call on all members of this Council to work with us in pressuring Russia's leadership to accept a ceasefire and to finally engage in good faith. Ukraine is ready. Members of this Council are ready and demanding it. It must finally happen. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Lambrinidis for his statement. And now, I'd like to give the floor, pursuant to Rule 37, to Ukraine.
Madam President, distinguished members of the Security Council, I thank the Presidency of Colombia for convening this emergency meeting upon the request of Romania. I wish you success in this important mission. Dear Foreign Minister Oana Tsoyu, Ukraine expresses its unwavering support with Romania and your people following this deeply alarming incident on May 29, when a Russian combat drone carrying explosive violated Romania's sovereign airspace and struck a residential area in the city of Galați, injuring civilians and causing significant destruction. Please convey, dear Minister Tsoyu, Ukraine's most sincere wishes of swift and full recovery to the family who has been injured because of this vicious Russian strike. Madam President, today once again we heard nothing new from the Russian representative. Unfortunately, he continues to sing the same old song, repeating the familiar narrative that it was not Russia, not a Russian drone, and relying on the well-worn patterns of denial and distortion. I believe there is no one in this chamber who would retain a single shred of trust in the words of Mr. Nebenza. Ukraine has full confidence in credible conclusions of the Romanian authorities that this was indeed a Russian drone and nothing else. Russia can throw all these conspiracy theories that we just heard into a waste basket. Mr. President, what happened in Romania was not a single instance and must be taken seriously. Beyond the official rhetoric of Russia, a pattern of alarming, systematic threats has become unmistakable. Leading Kremlin propagandists such as Vladimir Solovyov, Olga Skabeyeva and Margarita Simonyan have repeatedly used primetime broadcasts to openly discuss and call for strikes against major European capitals like London, Paris, or Berlin, normalizing in public discourse the very idea of war extending far beyond Ukraine. In one particularly chilling example, Ms. Skabeyeva's program even displayed countdown-style calculations claiming that Russian ballistic missile Sarmat could reach Berlin in 106 seconds, Paris in 200 seconds, and London in 202 seconds, turning the potential destruction of European capitals into a matter of a TV show. And even more strikingly, these narratives are echoed at the highest political level. Dmitry Medvedev, former president, he used on multiple occasions similar explicit threats, suggesting potential attacks on European cities. Taking together, all these statements are not isolated provocations, but part of a broader campaign in which the language of intimidation and the targeting of European capitals has been steadily mainstream into Russia's state-aligned messaging. In Galați, in Romania, we have witnessed that all this rhetoric is not just threats. Madam President, the recent attack against Romania was a cynical double strike, which carried at least two messages. The first was directed at Romania and all NATO member states. It was yet another attempt to test the resolve of our neighbors, to probe reactions and to see how far Russia can go in bringing its war of aggression ever closer to the territory of allied nations. But there was another second message. The Romanian city of Galați plays a special role in Ukrainian history as well, as the place where one of the most important rulers, Hetman Ivan Mazepa, found his final resting place over 300 years ago. Hetman Mazepa has remained a source of particular hatred and resentment for Moscow because he dared to challenge imperial rule and defend Ukraine's right to determine its own future 3 centuries ago. That is why many Ukrainians cannot overlook this bitter symbolism of a Russian drone striking a beautiful city of Galați in Romania, but so closely associated with Hetman Mazepa's sacred memory. It is another reminder that Russia's war is directed not only against Ukrainian statehood or territory, but also against our history and national identity. Madam President, to conclude, there are essentially two ways to respond to Russia's brazen, intentional drone strike on Galați. The first is the familiar one. We can express our outrage, condemn this violation, call upon Russia to refrain from such illegal actions in the future, and hope that all these appeals, including all those that were made this afternoon in the chamber, will somehow persuade Mr. Putin to stop sending his deadly drones towards Romania or Poland or any other neighboring countries of Ukraine. We have followed this path many times before. The results, or better to say their evident lack, speak for themselves. What we see now, we see the reaction before. There was an incident in Poland, you would remember, on the 12th of September, but all those signals were not really persuasive for Russia. This new strategy now in Romania is just another logical consequence of failure to put Russia in its place. This shall be another lesson for all of us. But there is, however, a second approach, how to address this intentional, I repeat, intentional drone strike against the peaceful city of Galați. We have to recognize that the most effective way to deal with these Russian attacks on Romanian citizens, and indeed on all European citizens, is to prevent those drones from entering Ukraine's airspace in the first place. In practical terms, this means helping Ukraine protect our skies and establish a powerful and fully integrated air defense shield with all the combined capabilities of our European partners. We urgently call upon our allies, also sitting on this table, not just to completely rethink and change the current approach and initiate a decisive shift in scale in the provision of air defense systems. We need at least a tenfold, but actually 20-fold increase. But what Ukraine needs most is the commitment of our European and our American partners to actively intercept and destroy Russian missiles and Russian drones over Ukraine's territory. The strikes on Galați should therefore become a turning point. The most effective response to Russia expanding its war across Europe is not another expression of concern, but a bold collective action that would deprive Russia of the ability to terrorize both Ukraine and all its neighbors. The safest Romanian sky begins with much better protected sky over Ukraine. Madam President, before I wrap up, I would like to react to Mr. Nebenza's baseless accusations regarding an alleged drone strike on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant that we just heard. We strongly reject this shameless allegation that is merely a figment of Russia's vivid imagination. As in the case of Starobilsk, there is no independent verification of this unfounded claim. Instead of staging this theatrical performance once again, Russia must immediately liberate Zaporizhzhia, the biggest NPP on European soil, stop playing with nuclear fire and get out of Ukraine. And with regard to Mr. Nebenza's repeated reference to the Starobilsk fake story, the continuous manipulation of facts reminds us a famous Soviet movie, let me quote traditionally in Russian, «Три магнитофона, три кинокамеры заграничных, три...»
3 foreign cameras, 3 cigar cases.
Flying in this chamber. I thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the representative of Ukraine.
Doy la palabra al representante.
I give the floor to the representative of Russia.
Pedido.
Thank you, Madam President. At the last meeting, Mr. Melnyk spoke about how the tragedy in Starobilsk was a fake, how nothing had in fact happened there, how it was impossible to confirm, and if people had died, they were adults. Today, I already mentioned that we would show the alleged adults that died in Starobilsk and what kind of fake this is. Look at this. Look at these adults. Yelena Martimianova, 20 years old. Yes, she is of age, technically an adult. Anna Pogrebnichenko, 19 years old. I can continue that list. There are 21 photographs here with dates of birth and dates of death. The cynicism with which Mr. Melnyk allows himself to mock human lives, the lives of children, exceeds all possible bounds. I won't comment about Zaporizhzhia. We'll comment on that separately. I've said everything I wanted to say on the topic. These materials will be sent to you today and disseminated amongst the members of the Security Council. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Russia for that statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Moldova.
Madam President, I thank the members of the Security Council who, together with Romania, requested the urgent convening of this meeting following a grave security breach and a serious violation of Romanian sovereignty airspace caused by the incursion of a Russian drone carrying explosives with direct impact on the civilians. I also thank the Colombian presidency for bringing us together today, and ACG Kayoko Gota for her briefing. Likewise, we welcome the participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania, Mrs. Oana Tsoyo, at this important meeting. Excellencies, the facts are deeply alarming. 2 people were injured, an apartment was destroyed, a fire broke out, and dozens of residents had to be evacuated. This is not an isolated technical incident. It is another dangerous consequence of Russian Federation's war of aggression against Ukraine and of reckless use of military force in close proximity to civilian areas and neighboring countries. We strongly condemn the egregious incident occurred in Galați, which represents a dangerous escalation. I would like to underline that any violation of Romania's sovereignty and security in a manner of direct concern for the entire region and for the Republic of Moldova. We express our full solidarity with Romania and with all those affected by the deeply alarming incident. We commend the Romanian authorities for their responsible and transparent response. Distinguished members of the Security Council, the Republic of Moldova unequivocally condemns the Russian Federation's ongoing war of aggression against Ukraine, now in its 5th year. This war constitutes a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations, of international law, of humanitarian law, and of fundamental principles on which the international system is built on. In the same vein, we reaffirm our unwavering support for the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, and therefore we reject and do not recognize the Russian Federation's illegal attempted annexation of Ukrainian territories. No military occupation, no sham referendum, and no unilateral act can alter internationally recognized borders. Attempts to review former patterns of domination, to redraw borders by force, or to deny the sovereign choice of nations should have no place in the 21st century and must be addressed by this Council. The Russian Federation bears full responsibility for launching and continuing this war of aggression, as well as for its devastating human, economic, environmental, and security consequences. This unjustified and unprovoked war must cease immediately. All those responsible for planning, ordering, and carrying it out must be held accountable. Madam President, the Republic of Moldova has also been directly affected by the spillover effects of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Since the beginning of the war, our authorities have registered 49 incidents involving unauthorized overflights, as well as several cases of missile and drone debris landing on our territory. These incidents serve as a stark reminder of a serious security risk facing my country and our citizens. We remain committed to addressing these risks in a systematic, lawful, and peaceful manner. These consequences also reach us through energy security. Russian attacks against Ukraine's energy infrastructure have repeatedly affected the Republic of Moldova's electricity supply and vital interconnections, leaving communities exposed to darkness, disruption, and uncertainty. The environmental dimension is equally serious. In March 2026, following a Russian attack against hydropower infrastructure in Ukraine, pollution reached the Dnistru River, the main source of drinking water for approximately 80% of Moldova's population and 98% of the population of our capital city, Chisinau. Water supplies were disrupted in several districts and in the municipality of Belz. This incident illustrated the transboundary environmental damage caused by attacks on civilian infrastructure and the direct threat such actions pose to environmental security, public health, and the right of civilians to safe drinking water. Excellencies, just as peace demands respect to the United Nations Charter, it is also requires accountability. The Republic of Moldova has actively supported international efforts to establish the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine, aimed at addressing one of the most serious accountability gaps in the international legal system. In this regard, we recall with particular significance the adoption in Chisinau on 15 May 2026 during the ministerial session of the Council of Europe, chaired by the Republic of Moldova, of a resolution establishing the enlarged partial agreement on the Management Committee of the Special Tribunal. Moreover, we remain deeply concerned by the probatory evidence of the United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, including a lawful killing of civilians, torture, arbitrary detention, conflict-related sexual violence, enforced disappearance, attack against civilian infrastructure, and widespread violations in territories under Russian occupation. We are particularly alarmed by the reports regarding the unlawful deportation and transfer of Ukrainian children from occupied territories of Ukraine to the Russian Federation and to territories under its control. Every unlawful transferred child must be identified, protected, and safely returned to Ukraine. Madam President, the incident in Galați is a warning. This Council cannot afford to ignore. It is a stark reminder of the serious consequences of the Russian Federation war of aggression against Ukraine and of the risks it continues to pose in and beyond Ukraine's borders. The time has come for this Council to act with clarity and responsibility and uphold the principles it was created to defend: sovereignty, territorial integrity, accountability, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. The Russian Federation must immediately cease its attacks against Ukraine, halt all actions that endanger neighboring countries, fully respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine and of all states in the region. At the same time, we urge all states not to relent in their support for Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting not only for its own sovereignty, independence, and survival as a nation, but also for the security of the European continent and for fundamental principles that underpin our common peaceful coexistence. In closing, the Republic of Moldova reiterates its support for a just and durable peace in Ukraine, in line with the United Nations Charter, international law, and relevant General Assembly resolutions. Such peace can only be achieved when the Russian Federation stops its war of aggression, immediately withdraw all its forces and military equipment from the Ukrainian territory, and respect Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Moldova for his statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
Es lo del Líbano. Ya. Declaro abierta.
The 10,163rd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Israel and Lebanon to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Martha Ama Akia Pobi, Assistant Secretary General